Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream at Monticello. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Laura Michael Balderson. I work for the Education and Visitor Programs Department, and we are here today to talk with Tabitha, who is our Collections and Exhibitions Manager, as well as Malia, who is a Museum Technician and Registration Assistant. They work for the Curatorial Department. I'm really excited to be here to talk to them today because I used to work for the Curatorial Department with them. They're some of my favorite colleagues, and we're here to talk about a really exciting time of the year, which is called the Big Clean. So I'm going to ask this first question to Tabitha. What is the Big Clean, and why do we do it?
Sure. So the Big Clean is something that we do every year, usually in January. We take 3 days in the middle of the week to clean every single room in the house. And we do top to bottom, floor to ceiling, and it gives us the opportunity to reach spaces that we wouldn't otherwise be able to reach on a normal day. And we do that as preventative conservation. We do it to check on our objects, anything on display, and it gives us a really good chance to get up close with items that we can't see from the floor that are only accessible by scaffold.
And who is involved in the Big Clean? Is it just you?
No. So in the Big Clean, there's actually, I think there are 6 of us here today. Typically, we have a crew of either 6 to 9 folks. The Curatorial Department is here. There are 4 of us. Sometimes we have our subs help. Laura Michael actually was part of the Big Clean last year. And we also are here with our restoration colleagues who take care of the architecture and the structures around the mountaintop. And they're also the bringers of the scaffold. And it's a great time that we all get to work together, and we kind of cross over into each other's jobs while we're doing the Big Clean.
All right, so let's talk to Malia. Malia, what kinds of things are you looking for while you clean?
Yeah, so during the Big Clean, we're not only cleaning, but it's a good chance for us to really get a close-up look at some of those individual objects. So we're looking for any damage, any signs of stress, and really any change in an object. So if we're talking about textiles, that could be we're looking for insect damage, evidence of pests like carpet beetles that can harm the collection, and really any sort of changes in some of the objects. One example of something that we caught during the Big Clean a couple of years ago was some of the Native American reproduction shields over on the other wall here in the entrance hall. We were looking at one of those and we noticed that it had slipped out of one of the sides of its mounts. And so on closer look, we could tell that it had sort of started to slump over time, and maybe it wasn't being supported enough by that mount. So we've since sent that out for conservation, and we're also having new mounts made and fittings made for not only that shield, but 2 others. And so we can sort of prevent that sort of issue in the future.
Those shields in particular, the bear shield is one of my favorite objects, and I'm so excited for when it eventually returns to us because I miss having him here in the entrance hall with us. And we have a question from Chester, who's watching today. Chester would like to know if there are any objects that you guys are especially excited that you get to touch during the Big Clean, like special things.
So, special objects for the Big Clean. Mine actually isn't a physical object. It's more of part of the architecture. And it's cleaning the windows here in the entrance hall. The windows up top here are beautiful, but they are also catchers of bugs. So that's a really satisfying clean to do. We get in there with Q-tips and we clean out the really small crevices. And once you're finished, it looks amazing. So that's probably my favorite area. In terms of objects, I like cleaning the bust. That's always a lot of fun as well. But I think Malia will probably talk about the artwork. That's also a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, so one of my favorite objects to clean are probably the large paintings on the upper floor of the parlor. It's really fun to get a close-up look at those. We'll take those, some years we'll take those off of the wall and get a really close-up look of those and the backs. A favorite space to clean is one really fun space to get into is the the closet in Jefferson's bedchamber. If you've been into the bedchamber in Monticello, you know the holes that you'll see closer up to the ceiling. So it's always fun to, it's a rare opportunity to get into that space and to be able to get some rare views of Monticello.
Wonderful. So we also have a question from Natalia, who'd like to know what gets the most dirty or damaged by visitors.
Leah, do you want to start on that one?
At the end of the day, the visitors a lot of people come through this house on a yearly basis, and so there's just a lot of dirt and dust that comes into the house. So the most dust that we get is really, the tops of the door frames and just any sort of flat surface that we really can't get to on a normal basis. And so the big clean is a really good opportunity for us to get to some of those areas.
Talk a little bit about the kinds of tools that you use. Tabitha mentioned Q-tips already. And how do those tools change depending on what you're cleaning?
Sure. So when we're doing the big clean, we're cleaning both the house, so the walls and the architecture elements, as well as the objects on exhibit. So for the walls, we're using some long-handled, soft-bristled brushes that we'll use to wipe, to brush some of the dirt and grime off the walls. We use a vacuum to vacuum the entablature and really, pull the dust out of those crevices in some of the architectural elements. And then we also wash the walls. And so for that, we'll use, we have some buckets with a tiny drop of a mild soap that we'll fill up with water. And then we will use sponges to lightly wipe down all the walls. As far as the objects, how we clean the objects depends 100% on what the object is. So for for smooth surfaces, we'll use some microfiber dust cloths to wipe all the dirt and grime off of those surfaces. And then for more delicate objects, we have a variety of soft horsehair brushes that we'll use to brush out of the more delicate and smaller crevices. And when we do that, we often have a vacuum with us, and we're like dusting the dust off the object and into the vacuum. And we are very rarely dusting using the vacuum head directly on an object. The exception to that is we have quite a few reproduction textiles in the house. And so for those, we have a specific vacuum head brush that we use exclusively for textiles to keep it clean. And we will vacuum up our reproduction textiles. So I think Tabitha might show us, demonstrate how we clean one of the objects down there.
Yes. So today we're actually on the side of the wall with all of the antlers. And when we clean these guys, they get a lot of cobwebs on them, and you can kind of see between the antlers. So this is actually these are elk antlers that belong to Thomas Jefferson. So a really cool thing that we can share. It's also probably one of the trickiest items to clean while we have scaffold up, just because of the length of his antlers. It could poke out an eye. So we do our best to keep body awareness. So for cleaning something like this, I'm going to turn the vacuum on. So we have it on a really low setting. And we use these bamboo brushes to just gently dust the antlers. You can't really see it happening, but the vacuum is sucking up that dust so that we are not just dusting onto other objects down below. And for most of our objects, including paintings, this is the technique that we'll use. On paintings, there are more intricate frames. So we have different size brushes. We have some smaller ones that can get into small spaces. So that's probably the one most consistent tactic that we use for cleaning objects.
And this is an object that a lot of people would like to touch because these are the original elk antlers brought back by Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery, right? So this is one of the sort of fan favorite objects throughout the house. So I'm sure lots of our viewers are jealous right now that you get to have this up close opportunity with these antlers, despite the mild danger, right? Well, moving on, When you are doing the big clean, do you move furnishings? Do you take down wall objects, and why or why not?
Sure. We will clean everything on the walls. Whether we take an object off the wall or not really depends on the object. We're always mitigating, we're always trying to balance the risks of moving something from the wall versus removing that dust and dirt from it, which can be harmful to the object. So some of the objects, say like one of our large paintings, like Salome with the head of John the Baptist, that's in the parlor, that removing that from a wall is really can involve a lot of risk. And so it's really too much risk to even do it on a yearly basis. So we do that occasionally, but it's certainly not something we do during the big clean. Other objects we will remove from the walls, but if it's too big or too complicated to remove from the wall, we will cover it with a sheet or a drop cloth to avoid any drips or dust being brushed down onto it.
Another question from a viewer here. Cynthia wonders if you've ever found something that you didn't know was there during the big clean. So do you ever make sort of like architectural discoveries or things like that when you take something off the wall?
Unfortunately, I have to say that no, I have not found anything that would be an object. We once found a dime stuck in the parquet flooring in the parlor that one of our museum techs, who's down here cleaning, she and I did some very intricate tweezer work to get that out of there. So that was kind of one of those, like, how did this happen and how did it get so far in there? But in terms of objects, that wasn't super exciting, but we added it to the piggy bank.
One of my favorite unexpected objects in the house is the chicken bone in the tea room, which for those of you who don't follow us on social media, Preservation Monticello has a great social media presence, and I encourage you to go and learn about the chicken bone in the wall in the tea room. But for now, we're going to move on to another question. ASAP would like to know which objects need more attention because of humidity and other atmospheric issues. So sort of detailed question there.
Malia, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So some of the framed artwork, so in the upper level of the parlor, that's sort of a tricky spot to control the humidity of because there's so much fluctuation from the lower level to the upper level of the house. So for that, we are always using the big clean to monitor those frames, as well as furniture is something that we also will monitor for humidity conditions. But it can be particularly problematic with some of the paintings in the upper level of the parlor because of the humidity fluctuations. So one thing that we've done because of that in the parlor is some of our paintings, we have put, not the frames, but the paintings themselves are in microclimate enclosures. So that really helps mitigate the fluctuation that they will experience, which can be really harmful to the paintings themselves. So we have hobos, which are data loggers that are kept in some of those micro enclosures, and they will help us really keep an eye on some of the humidity up there.
Great. Well, so how many rooms do you clean during the big clean, and is it only the house that gets cleaned?
So no, it is not just the house that is cleaned. And you're going to test my memory here. I believe it's 22 rooms in the house that we clean on the upper 3 floors. We also do the basement, the cellar, but we typically do those on a different day. The upper 3 floors, they take all the time that we have typically. But we have big cleans in the spaces downstairs, and we also have a big clean in the visitor center, which our colleagues in custodial do a lot of the day-to-day cleaning in there. But we take advantage of the big clean in that space to go behind the stanchions, go behind all of the panels, get into the window wells, and really clean in there as well.
And then other than cleaning, what else happens during the big clean?
So what else happens during the big clean? So we typically try to have projects ready for us to take care of. Last year, we were checking measurements and labels on the back of paintings. Our colleagues from Restoration, they check on the architecture. I think Malia will talk a little bit more about that. Trying to think. We have taken objects down. Paintings in the parlor either are going out for conservation or something coming back from conservation. So we take advantage of the scaffolding being in place to return those items to be on view.
Yeah, one thing we're also doing is, I mentioned earlier, our data loggers that are in the upper level of the parlor. And so some of those, we have them hanging behind some of the paintings as well as on pediments. Those data loggers we use to read the humidity and the temperature in the house. And since we're up there so rarely, we use that opportunity to change batteries in some of our devices that help us monitor issues in the house.
And then we have a question here from Bonnie, who wants to know if all of this work during the big clean helps to identify future projects for conservation and things like that.
That is a fantastic question. Yes, it does. As Malia noted about the Native American shields, when we saw what was happening, we said, yes, we need to send this out for conservation. The other two shields were in good condition, but they were collecting dust just because of the leather that they're made of. So we decided, because the one had an issue, that we will get all three cleaned and remounted. So that was one big thing that we discovered. On the paintings, we just did a painting conservation survey, so we're hoping we don't find any surprises. But we do see up close if there's a lot of dust on the surface or if something needs to be cleaned. So those are some things that we have found while we're out and about. Typically the furniture we already know about because we've been close to it and we've been moving it. So hopefully not too many discoveries like that.
A couple more questions from viewers here. Natalia wonders if you guys have fun or is this boring like cleaning your own house?
Oh, I think we both.
Yeah, these are actually probably some of my favorite days of the year. It's really fun to, the museum techs are in the house every day, but it's not every day that we get to put a scaffolding up and climb up to the upper tiers and see some of those objects up close.
I agree with that. I think this is also my favorite time of the year, and it does give us a chance to work with our colleagues from Restoration. It gives our subs a chance to work with us. And it's always an adventure. We always have a great time. And I'm a big fan of the big clean myself too.
And then Cynthia wonders if they would have done a big cleaning like this during Jefferson's Day.
Oh, that's an excellent question and one that I do not know the answer to. I am guessing that they did cleaning, but I don't know if they would have done it all at the same time. With the amount of objects, it probably would have taken an extremely long amount of time just because of how many things were in here. And also they didn't have modern scaffold that would roll from one place to another. So that would be another complication that we don't have to try to figure out, but I'm sure that there were a lot of issues whenever trying to get up to close to the paintings, especially on the upper tiers.
And I'll sort of jump in here and give a little bit of context for that as well. We know that very often Jefferson is away from the house for long periods of time, right? It's not until he retires in 1809 that he lives here full time. And even then, he builds a second home or has built a second home, Poplar Forest, where he would go for up to a month at a time, at least once a year. And so day to day, when Thomas Jefferson lived here, it was a really full house, up to 24 people or so living in this house, and sometimes dozens of guests as well. And it would have been the constant task of enslaved people to keep the house clean to a certain extent. Keep in mind, there's fires burning in the fireplaces, there's oil lamps, there's multiple meals a day being served here. There's all sorts of the just sort of regular mess of living that's happening here. But when Jefferson and his family left for lengthy periods of time, which would have been fairly common prior to 1809 and not unheard of following 1809, that would have been a good opportunity for the whole house to receive the kind of deep cleaning that it would have been really hard to do if there were, say, 30 to 40 people throughout the house all day long. All right. We have another question here. Dylan, who's watching, asks if there's documentation for enslaved people cleaning specific rooms in this house.
That is another question that I do not know. Laura Michael, is that one that you know?
Little bit about that, yeah. So we know, for example, that it is members of the Hemmings family largely who are in charge of the inside of the house here at Monticello. So we know, for example, that people like Sally Hemmings was a chambermaid here in the house. So that is cleaning and sewing, interior tasks such as that. We know that Burl Colbert was the enslaved head butler here, and he would have been largely in charge of managing that enslaved household staff. We also know that it would have been, in many cases, young enslaved children between ages maybe 5 and 10 who are going to be doing things like supplying firewood to the house for day-to-day tasks like that. So we know that there's probably about 12 to 20 enslaved people who work in the house on a day-to-day basis while the Jefferson family is living here. And again, they are almost entirely all members of that large Hemmings family, and they are the ones who would have been taking care of these spaces. In most cases, we don't have specific references to specific people caring for specific rooms, but we also can do some good history work there and look at which enslaved people are serving which Jefferson family members, right? So Burl Colbert, as the head butler, he's also Jefferson's manservant. So he's going to be largely responsible for Jefferson's private suite spaces and making sure that they've been cleaned, either doing that himself or making sure that an enslaved scullery maid has done that work. So we really can extrapolate to some extent who would have been in charge of the cleaning of different interior house spaces. Absolutely. Okay, you guys are very popular. We have a lot of questions here. So Melissa asks if you do maintenance like sealing and polishing while you're in the middle of the big clean, or is that sort of a separate event?
So yeah, that would be a separate event. A lot of any of our metals, we would probably have a conservator do any kind of lacquer on those. We wouldn't be polishing the silver if they're original objects because that does take away from the surface. We would do a light cleaning. Again, we would have it lacquered. Typically, projects like that would be a special project for another day, where here we are trying to get the big clean happening. But those very specific items we probably are going to do on a different day just to give us enough time. The big clean might be an opportunity to go ahead and take those things off view if they're difficult to reach.
All right, so a big question. This is the first time that the big clean has happened while Monticello is closed to the public. So usually you guys are doing this and we're running tours through the house. Can you tell us about how you make that happen?
Yes, so that is actually pretty bittersweet for me, really. While we are closed to the public, we really have free range of the house. We can move the scaffold to be wherever we need it to be. We can move furniture. It gives us a lot of flexibility, and we're not, interrupting tours, which can happen. It's difficult to run vacuums during tours. We don't want to drown out the tour guide. That kind of defeats the purpose. But for me, I really enjoy when we have tours. A lot of times in January, we are getting school groups, and the kids on those tours ask the best questions, and they're just so much fun to answer. And a lot of times, it's an opportunity for school kids to see their other jobs at a museum. When I was 8 or 9, I had no idea what you could do at a museum. I saw the tour guide, and that was about it. So I think this is a great opportunity for anybody, kids and adults alike, to see what goes on behind the scenes. We love when people ask us questions. So this is our virtual question session from tours. So it's probably, the workflow is probably a little bit quicker while we're closed, but it does take away that aspect of guest interaction.
Well, coming close to the end of our questions here, I'm going to ask this question to both of you. What room is the most challenging to clean, do you think?
Well, I know what Malia is going to say because it's also mine, so I'll let her go first.
Sure. My favorite, the most challenging room to clean is probably the parlor. It's such a large room, so it really takes a lot of different moves of the scaffolding to make it all the way around the room. And with each move of the scaffolding, we're also moving those furniture and objects on the floor to be able to move to the next spot with the scaffolding. And it takes a lot of coordination between all of the team members on our staff to be able to clean both the lower level, the middle level, and the upper tier, as well as a lot of hands. If we're going to remove a painting, it takes a lot of hands to stabilize that enough to get it down.
So second favorite, since the parlor is also my first, it's pretty close to a tie for my favorite. That room is actually the entrance hall that we're in right now. It has the complicated paintings that are on that upper tier, but it does have a variety of objects. We have leather, Native American items, we have busts, we have fossils, we have just a little bit of everything. And because of the layout of this space, we have to be very creative with the scaffold. So it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. We have to figure out a way to get through the antlers. We have to figure out a way to straddle a case, for instance. So I think this one, if you're looking to see like, oh, what do the curatorial team, what do they do during the big clean? This is a good example of a little bit of everything.
All right, and then our last question, again for both of you. What is the most fun part of the big clean for you? And I'm going to go ahead and say, other than going to Mickey Tavern after you're all finished to celebrate.
Yes, in years past, we do a big lunch as a team. This year, sadly we won't, but we can make up for it once it's safe to do so again. But I have to say, the best thing about this is getting to work with the team that we have. The museum technicians are in the house on a daily basis. I'm typically kind of splitting my time between places. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to work together. We get to work with our restoration colleagues who I am always learning new things from them. And it's a really good back and forth and conversation. And the work is, because of how tight knit the group is, the work comes easy. So I think that is definitely my favorite thing of the big clean.
One of my favorite parts of the big clean is probably just all the different views we get of Monticello, whether you're, cleaning something on the balcony and looking down, or whether we are up, 3 levels up on the scaffolding, and just getting to see Monticello from a different perspective is always a treat.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us today to talk to us about the big clean, to get a really very cool look at how we maintain the house here. Thank you to all of you for joining us today for this live stream. Thank you for your wonderful questions, and we hope you'll join us again next week for more content.